This channel is what studying abroad dreams are made of. Do subscribe and hit the bell icon.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Like every week we are back with some really interesting content, and this week we will be talking about the GRE test that can be taken at home online. And to talk about this test, we have Mary with us. Thank you so much, Mary, for joining us today. Mary is a GRE instructor and she is the head of GRE Curriculum at Manhattan Prep. Thank you so much, Mary, for joining us today and taking out the time to talk to the student community here with us.
Happy to be here with you.
Mary, we're going to dive straight into the questions. And the first question I want to ask you is, what is it like to take the test, at home? You're sitting in front of your system. What is the kind of technology you need? What is the kind of ambience you need around you? And, all those basic things, the basic setup.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the first obvious difference is that you are at home, right? So that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on both your surroundings, like what your home environment is like, and how important it is to you that you have a really quiet space in which to take the test. I had a colleague take the test a couple of days ago, and he said that he didn't anticipate how loudly his neighbor would be playing music. And so that turned out to be pretty frustrating. And he spent a lot of the test just, pressing his fingers in his ears so that he could concentrate. So you want to definitely pick a quiet space in your home. You also are going to, you're being monitored by a live proctor. So a person is watching you through a camera, through a computer camera. And if you don't have a computer camera, you'll have to get an external camera. Because you must be able to be viewed by this proctor. And so you'll have to show a 360-degree view of the room to this proctor, and that there can be no one else in the room. So it needs to be an empty room, and you can't take it in a public space. It can't be like in a coffee shop or anything like that.
Is it like to be, being evaluated by a proctor? Do I have to interact with the proctor during the test?
Yes. So this has been a really interesting experience. I've heard a lot of different stories about what that's like from students and colleagues alike who have taken the test. Now, I want to go ahead and say the test itself is identical to the test you would take at a center. So the experience of the test questions are the same. You can skip around within a section just like you can if you were to take the test at a center. The scoring is the same. The structure is the same. You take a 10-minute break at the same spot. All of that is identical. So this is a virtual proctor who's watching you. This is a person on the other, right, on the other end of your computer. And I've heard of situations where, this person may make some calls that are specific to that person. So for example, you're not actually supposed to have food on hand during the exam. You can have a snack during your break, but you're not supposed to have food during the exam. But I've known of at least one person who's been permitted by his proctor to snack during the exam. So I think, unlike testing at testing centers, which is very regimented and uniform and everyone has the same experience, I think what I'm really hearing about the GRE at home is that there is a little bit of variability depending on who your proctor is. Now, again, that's not around like the actual important features of the test. The test is the same, the structure is the same, you have the same amount of time, but it's just around small things like how long your break might be. It's supposed to be 10 minutes, but if you're having trouble getting your proctor's attention when you sit back down, it could be 13 or even up to 15 minutes. there's another big difference in the GRE at home is that you cannot use scratch paper, actual paper. You have to use an erasable surface like a whiteboard. And I know that several people have been able to have more than one whiteboard, like 2 whiteboards. And so that's interesting. Like, I don't want to tell people that they definitely can have 2 whiteboards, because I don't know that that's going to be true every time, but I know that it has at least been true for a couple of people. Another kind of thing that's sort of varied at times is that with these whiteboards, I believe you are supposed to show at the end of your exam that it's, you know, that it's all been erased, that you've erased everything. But you know, that's basically on the proctor to remind you to do that. So you know, there are those kind of unpredictable pieces that I think are introduced when you're taking the GRE at home, because you're in your own space, your own environment, you're not in a regulated test center, and you have this, you know, human proctor who's watching you, and who frankly is probably administering other types of exams as well. I heard of one situation where the proctor didn't know that it was called the GRE and thought it was called the GRI. So I mean, I think, you know, and that's not the proctor's job to be an expert in the exam, but that just gives you a sense of how well, you know, some of these proctors really know what you're there to do. They know you're there to take a test, and they have to make sure that it's secure, but they may not actually know very much about the test you're actually taking.
I love the points that you made. You actually spoke about everything that students are looking for in terms of information, you know, proctoring, check. We've spoken about the whiteboard, which I'll come to because you made some really interesting points. And then you said that, of course, a peaceful ambience around you. You've got to have your door shut. It's got to be a clean desk. You can't have, you know, pieces of paper, or you can't have books lying around. But you said that about the whiteboard, there are people who have used 2 boards at once, or, you know, 2 sheets of paper, which is pretty amusing. And at the same time, like you said, Mary, you might want to keep one additional one at hand, but you never know if the proctor is going to allow you or not, right? So
Right.
Definitely make that very clear before you start the test that I have this, I'm going to use this. Because if they catch you midway, I don't know if that would be okay, right?
Right, exactly. You definitely don't want any surprises coming up for the proctor midway through your exam. Like that's not a situation I think you want to find yourself in. And to the, you know, with the whiteboards, I think that is something I also find students want to talk about, because that is a big difference from taking it in a center where you can use actual scratch paper and pencils, right? Which is presumably what you've been studying with, pencils or pens, right? And you can, you know, you can fit a lot more on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with a pencil, a lot of people think, than you could on a whiteboard. And so that requirement for the at-home exam, I've heard some students say, gives them anxiety. But I would say a way around that is that, you know, some of it, not all of us have used whiteboards in a long time. And since you were kind of in school, like maybe in, you know, grade school, whiteboard markers have really improved. So like, you don't have to use one of those thick tip pens. Like, you can get some really thin tip whiteboard erasable pens on, you know, Amazon or wherever, and they basically write like a pen or a pencil. So it doesn't have to be this, you know, scary thing where it's going to be so different than what you've been working with. You can actually get a pretty close approximation to working with scratch paper.
Absolutely. And a lot of you guys from India or from the Asian you know, countries, you could definitely buy one of these over Amazon if you don't have any of the stores open near you. I actually feel that it's way better to use the whiteboard because the moment you're done with whatever you're working on, you can erase that, and there's no more that you know, visual noise on the paper, or, you know, in this case on the whiteboard. So that will actually add to your focus.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, and also in the center, I mean, to your point, like in the center, you only have a few sheets of scratch paper that are stapled together. I mean, I've even heard of people having as few as just 2 sheets of paper, which is so little. And so, of course, when you run out, you can raise your hand and the proctor will bring you fresh scratch paper, but that takes time, like you have to decide when you're going to do that, when you can afford to do that. You may want to wait until a break between sections to do that. And with the whiteboard, that eliminates that issue, right? You just erase and you're fine.
Absolutely. Apart from that, right, the exam itself, we wanted to understand if there's any kind of difference from the traditional exam versus the exam at home, in relation with the quality of questions. Are they tougher or easier, or are they the same?
So other than these things that we're talking about, making sure that you have the quiet space, being ready for a little bit of technological troubleshooting with your proctor, the test itself should be identical. And to the point about the technological troubleshooting, I would advise people to be prepared for there to be some hiccups. I haven't talked to anyone who hasn't had at least one little hiccup with the technology at some point during the test. Nothing major, but just, something where they lose internet connection or lose their communication with the proctor at least once, and maybe it's only for 1 minute, but it happens because you're running this very secure software and you're trying to take this test while being observed by another person. I mean, there are a lot of moving pieces, right, that have to work together, and so it's natural that there are going to be a couple of hiccups.
So what happens if I have a glitch in my internet? And for a good 30 seconds, I lose internet and I come back. What happens then?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on what kind of glitch it is, but I've known a couple of situations where that has happened and the timer has continued. So it's not like the timer stops and then you get to resume the test. The timer keeps going. So you've essentially lost that 30 seconds.
So can you go back and tell the proctor that I did not have that, for those 30 seconds or 1 minute, I lost my internet connection. Can you do something about it?
I suspect that's not going to be an option, just because the proctor doesn't have, again, I'm basing this on what I have heard of people having this experience, but I don't suspect the proctor has the ability to reset the clock like that. I think it's probably even secured against that kind of intervention by the proctor. So, it may, of course, if there were an egregious situation where you lost a lot of internet time, like something would have to be done about that. I mean, they're not gonna, if you lose 5 minutes, they're not gonna, I imagine that would be a situation that you could remedy by contacting ETS in some way. I suspect it would be something like you would just get an opportunity to take the test again. They're not going to give you like a score credit or anything like that.
Right. So there is a possibility that they will get back and say that you could take a retest if you've lost a lot of time. But that's a rare case.
Yeah, and I can't speak for them, of course, but that's what I would suspect. Yeah.
Right. So we had a conversation with another student recently, and he lost internet for about 30 seconds. And once he bounced back, he mentioned that they had paused his timer. So I feel that these updates are happening on the go. Like as we talk, ETS is updating its systems, I'm assuming. And fairly so, because they are understanding from the feedback that they're getting from all the students or people who are taking the test. So
yeah, that's fantastic to hear. That's great. If that's what's happening, that's very encouraging.
But then again, like you said, it's different for different people, different experiences, from proctor to technology, all those things. But I think one thing that's constant is the kind of questions that you're going to get. So definitely prepare the same way that you would, prepare for a traditional test at the center.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, I was just going to say the only thing I might do differently to prepare for the at-home exam is go ahead and start practicing with a whiteboard instead of paper. Yeah, just to get used to it. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, definitely start practicing on the whiteboard. See if you can get a LAN connection for your system that that gives a little more substance to your internet connection. I think that also is a constant suggestion from a lot of students. In general, Mary, what are your suggestions for students, all the aspirants out there who are taking the test?
So I think if you choose to take it at home, again, just really make sure you have a very quiet place in your house. Choose the quietest room. Don't have your cell phone in the room. I would let the people you know and love that know that you're taking the test so that they don't call you during it, and when you don't answer, think something's wrong and come to your house and interrupt you.
Mom says, no, I don't care what test you're taking, you better do the vessels right now.
Right, exactly. Tell her it just needs to wait 4 hours. And then absolutely have snacks on hand for your 10-minute break, because even if you aren't a snacker, these kind of tests, they really do sap you of your energy. And so you're going to need that replenishment during your break. I know, during each section, just like at a testing center, each section is either 30 or 35 minutes long, and then you have a 1-minute break. During that 1-minute break, you are supposed to remain in the visual field of your proctor. So you're technically supposed to remain sitting, just like you would be at the center. But that doesn't mean you can't, stretch, like actually stretch and roll your head and breathe. And so I always encourage students to do that, because it's a long time to sit there, and when you cramp up, it can start to affect your performance mentally.
Absolutely. Just to add to that, so we were speaking to a few students, and one of them mentioned that through the 10-minute break that you get, let the proctor know that you want the entire break. Because for a few students, what has happened is that once a student steps out, the proctor is aware, but just because the student has come and is back seated in his desk, they've restarted the timer.
Oh,
but that just because I'm seated doesn't mean I want to restart. It means I just want 2 minutes, the last 2 minutes, I just want to sit and, compose myself for the upcoming session. So let the proctor know that even if you're back, I think you would want that.
That's great advice. Thank you. I had not heard that. So that's good. I'm going to share that with my students too.
Yes, please. Yes. I think we've covered a lot of important points. Thank you so much, Mary, for joining us. Guys, if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to us in the comment section below. You can even reach out to us on our social media handles, iSchoolConnect. And of course, for anything that you need to prepare, there's Manhattan Prep. Thank you so much, Mary, once again, for joining us. That's all from today. That's all from us today. Thank you and take care, guys. Bye-bye.